G'day everyone. Thanks for coming along to the second in our UMBO series of webinars talking about digital practice and online therapy. I'm Ed Johnson. I'm one of the co-founders of UMBO, and I've got Kizzy Ed here today, who's one of the fantastic speech pathologists at UMBO. And although we're both speech pathologists, we're hoping that some of the things we talk about today are going to be more broadly applicable to other allied disciplines, and also people working alongside allied health professionals as well, in support coordination, in education, and all those kinds of areas that intersect in the NDIS world, especially, and the early childhood world. I want to start by acknowledging the Wiradjuri people on Wiradjuri land today, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. And I wanted to do the same for the other countries and First Nations around Australia, and all of the rich culture and learning traditions that they bring. So today we're going to do around 45 minutes of talking. Kizzy's going to talk us all through some of the ways to make sure that you've got a great setup at your end, and you've got a great setup at the client's end, so that you can be successful in digital practice. And after that, we're going to have around 15 minutes put aside for questions, if there are any. So we'll get to answering those questions as best we can after that. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Kizzy and take it away.
Thanks, Ed. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, which is the land that I'm on. And I'd also like to say that we'd like this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So there is a chat function. We welcome you to use it whenever you want to ask questions, make comments. We'll also be sharing handouts through that function, as well as polls. So if you could please participate in the polls, we'd really like to hear a bit of about where you're all from and what your opinions are. So to get us started, I'll just start with one of the polls. So hopefully that works. What is your current role? We'd love to hear where you're, yep, oh great, okay. Quite a few speech therapists and a couple of others. You're welcome to comment if you'd like to tell us what your background or your association is. You're all welcome. Dietitian, lovely. So I will now get started on the equipment setup and considerations. So this is the very basics of online therapy. I'm sure many of you are already on top of some of this, or maybe most of this. So of course we've got hardware, and here in particular from the therapist's point of view, we're talking about computers and laptops, your webcam, your microphone, and in particular for a therapist, if you're working from home and you have other people around, having a headset can be really good to ensure client privacy is kept. I have colleagues who actually have an extra screen, so they've got the whole PC display, but with an extra screen, because what you'll find is when you're working from home, there are so many things to do, not just looking at your client through the screen, but also typing on your notes, and then maybe you're also screen sharing as well. So having that extra space can really help. In terms of a microphone, that can be quite good for the client if they have access to a microphone, in particular if you're a speech therapist and you're trying to listen very closely to the speech sounds, but it's not essential. And of course, a webcam as a therapist can be really helpful if you're wanting to zoom in, for example, on your mouth, or even just have a clearer vision for your clients. And so in terms of software, the two main things would be having your online therapy platform. At Umbo, we use CoView, but you definitely don't need to use CoView. It's just important to consider that when you're selecting an online therapy platform, that you're thinking about, privacy, confidentiality. So that could be things like where the encryption of the data, where the data is being stored. Is it being stored in Australia or overseas? And also the privacy policies of your funder. And by that I mean NDIS, Medicare, and also other funding agencies. Something else to keep in mind is how you're sharing your data with your client, or how your client's sharing your data with you. Of course, we've got email as an easy option, but then you might need to consider, if you want to share a larger file, what you'll do about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Last but not least, there's also the environment to consider. So as a therapist, you definitely want to be thinking about having a quiet, private environment, but also appropriate lighting. So making sure the lighting is in front of you, not behind, and potentially also reminding your clients about that as well. And maybe double checking what's behind you so that there isn't anything that you'd rather not be there. Also very important would be to consider the internet connection. So as a therapist, consider where your internet source is, how far away from it you are, and if it's Wi-Fi, what potential barriers there might be, because Wi-Fi does get impacted as it's traveling between walls. Another polling question I would love to ask is, what online therapy platform you might be using if you're currently using online therapy? And I'll see if I can find it on here. Here we go. Oh. Zoom, CoView, excellent. Oh, quite a few others. I'd love to hear what other platforms you're using. Oh yes, Google Meet, of course. Yeah, we use Google Meet for our internal interviews, or for our internal meetings. Great. Okay, so now on to some perhaps more interesting content, the key support person. So this is something that Umbo heavily encourages and advocates for. The reason being is it can be really, really helpful to identify a person who can actually be present with the client when you're conducting therapy. And by that, we mean anyone from a family member or a teacher, like a teacher's aide, an educator or a friend, and of course, an allied health assistant or a support worker. And basically, they assist with things like accessing the hardware or the software, solving any connection difficulties. They would also be on the receiving end of coaching. They'd help you with follow-up and of course communication, many other things. I will say though that a key support person isn't going to be important in every case. It definitely depends on the client. In some situations, it might be perfectly fine to just work one-to-one with the client and that's all you'll need. But in particular with a younger client, it's very good to have that consistent person present. And ideally throughout the entire session, so that they can help you through any challenges, be there to help with concentration, and of course receive the coaching. But if that's not possible, having them there at the beginning and at the end is most important. So next slide. Preparing for your very first session. So when it comes to preparing for your very first session, there are considerations both from your end as a clinician and considerations from the end of the client. So from your end as the clinician, it's most important to test. In particular, if it's your first time or your first couple of times trying online therapy. So test out your online therapy platform, test out the video, the audio, the microphone, and you can very easily do this by getting a friend or a colleague or a family member to pretend to be a client on the other end and give you some feedback. And they can also give you feedback about things like echo, lag, internet speed, all really important things to try to figure out for a better quality service. And then on the client's end, if it's the client's first time receiving online therapy, and oftentimes it will be, also remind your clients to test their internet access and their ability to use the software or the therapy platform. And you can do that by sending them the link a little bit earlier, maybe sending them a text reminder, and that'll just save you a little bit of time when you're actually starting your first session, because usually there's a little bit of problem solving to do in that first session anyway to make sure it's all working. When it comes to the client testing their internet at home, you could recommend, depending on if you're having any issues or not, or any concerns, you could recommend they look up an internet speed test online. You basically just type that into Google and they can have a look. They could even, try different places at home to see where their internet works best. Also for our clients, if they're, this is something I forgot to mention before, although for therapists, we generally are using laptops and webcams, of course, for clients, so long as they have a smartphone or a tablet, that is perfectly fine. So in those instances, make sure that they've got their devices charged. And also, if you've got a young client, maybe reminding them to take a bit of a toilet break beforehand, in particular, if you might be doing your online therapy while they're at school. So now we've got a few handouts to share. One of them being an UMBO handout that was put together to basically be a little bit of a checklist of the sorts of things to be aware of when you're first starting therapy. So please feel free to have a look and download. I will also share another handout, which is from Speech Pathology Australia, because I'm a speechy, but hopefully it's relevant to all of you from other disciplines as well. So there's that one. I'll just see if there's another one too, although I don't think there is. Looks like that might be it. Great. Okay, I will keep going then. So next slide. Common mistakes and how to avoid them. So these are common mistakes that we've come across at UMBO. If there are some other mistakes though that you've come across or that you're particularly concerned about coming across that you would like to share, please feel free to type them into the chat and we'll try to get to them at the end. So one of the very first things I'd like to say, which seems like common sense, but check your background. So when you're first starting, open up your video or your camera and actually have a look at what's behind you so that there isn't anything that you perhaps don't want there that could be there. There have been so many viral videos online going around of people with things in the background that they don't want there. So it's always good to remember to double check. And when it comes to the online therapy platform that you use, it's incredibly important that you make sure the platform you're using is actually compliant with all the privacy policies of your organization, but also the policies of the funder. So we're talking NDIS, Medicare, private health insurance, any other funders. It's really, really good to double check. And I mentioned before, it's because of things like encryption, where the data is being stored, etc. Some funders don't necessarily allow for online therapy as well. So it's really good to double check. NDIS is of course perfectly fine. And I think last I checked Medicare, you can do online therapy, but it's temporary. And of course with private health, you want to be checking with each individual funder. If you refer to your association, though, generally they should have more information on that. So when it comes to microphones, having them on a firm, flat surface, you might need to remind your client perhaps that if they're using a tablet or a smartphone, that they're having them on a firm, flat surface when possible, just to help with audio quality. Adjusting the lighting for visibility. So again, for yourself and for your clients, having the lighting in front of you rather than behind. But even when the lighting is in front of you, you want to make sure it's not too bright because you might end up getting that white kind of mask. And last but not least, always have a plan B. So we will go into this very soon, but you can't expect tech to work all the time. Unfortunately, when it comes to online therapy, something will go wrong. And so it's really good to always have a backup option, of which there are many that we'll talk about. So yeah, if you've made any mistakes, what are they? If you're willing to share. And also I've got another poll question. So I'll just see if I can find it. And this is just, actually, nope, the poll question isn't there. That's okay. I was just going to ask what was the most interesting of what we've covered so far, but we'll get to that at the end anyway. And thank you for sharing, Robbie and Miranda. Great. So next slide. Overcoming tech issues. So this is where I was talking a bit about having plan Bs. So of course, you're going to run into issues with internet and, video, audio, your online therapy system. It's going to happen. So when it comes to connectivity, obviously the first thing to do is try to optimize your internet speed. You can do an internet speed test where it works best. Consider your proximity to the router and any barriers to your Wi-Fi. But on your client's end, when they come across internet issues at home, perhaps they could just go to a library. They can go to their local library where the internet might be better. Perhaps, maybe you can do the therapy session at school rather than at home, if that works. And there are other options as well, like just giving the parents a call. You don't need to do therapy necessarily through video all the time. And if you have clients who might be accessing services with you when they're not with their main caregiver, like their parent, make sure that you have the contact details of whoever will be helping you with the setup of the session and participating in the session. So for example, if your client's at school and it's the teacher's aide who will be with them, if possible, have their details as well, so that if anything goes wrong, you can contact them immediately and there isn't that delay in trying to get in touch and figure things out. Okay, so what challenges have you come across or are you perhaps concerned about when it comes to tech? Let me see if I've actually got a poll for that. Oh, let me just share that one. If that's shared. Sorry, this is it. Okay. I've definitely had some personal experiences with tech issues. So one time I was having actually I think it was my very first session with a client, and our videos were working, my audio was working, but we couldn't manage to get their audio to work. And so all I ended up doing was muted myself, gave them a phone call, and I basically had them on speaker, they had me on speaker, and we continued to have our session via the teletherapy platform. And I didn't even notice that we didn't manage to get the audio working. I've had moments where my sessions have mostly revolved around screen share, and screen share decided not to work. And when that happened, I basically just did a bunch of role play, coaching, which is always great to do anyway. And we decided to end our session earlier than usual, which I don't see anything wrong with doing. The parents were happy to do it as well. And I think it's always better to end a session when it seems like it's time to end it rather than dragging it on. Something that some speechies might be thinking about as well are the challenges around doing speech sound assessments through online therapy because of the potential challenges around clear audio and clear vision. So under those circumstances, there are options as well, like the phone call I mentioned, or doing things, normally over online therapy, but then having maybe the parent audio record it, on their phone and then transferring that data to you later to have another listen through. So that's definitely another option. Now, when it comes to, overcoming tech issues in terms of hardware, I've pretty much already talked about this one. So that's just about considering all the different devices you have and your client has at your disposal. If the client doesn't have a computer or laptop, that's fine. They can use their tablet, they can use their smartphone, whatever works for them. You can just have a phone call. You can have emails, text messages, and work with everything you have at your disposal. And the positive thing about having your client use their smartphone or tablet is you can explore their world with them. You can follow them through their daily routines. You can observe the challenges they face in their everyday life. And that makes for great data when it comes to functional goals. UMBO has had some challenges as well with limited hardware issues. So one of the most recent ones was where we were having challenges getting our clients to sign forms. And that was because we were emailing our forms to our clients, but some of them didn't have access to a printer. So what we've ended up doing is we now print out some of our paperwork and mail it to the clients who would rather it mailed. And I think we've also, our admin officer has recently set up interactive PDFs so we can now also receive digital signed forms. Now onto my personal favorite, building rapport through the screen. Honestly, I don't personally think it's all that different to building rapport face-to-face. When it comes to building rapport with the client, I recommend, especially during your first session, doing something that's like an icebreaker or having something interesting that really attracts their attention. So for example, you could be waiting for them to come onto your session with like a silly hat. And honestly, in particular, when you're working with little clients, it just works so well. They'll come on, they'll be like, what is that? And it's just a really great way to get them engaged and interested. As you can probably see, I have a very big dog, so I use him to my advantage as well. It not only engages children, it engages adults, it engages staff in meetings. It's really a really great tool for me. But in saying all of that, our job is not to keep a client, or in particular a child, occupied on the screen with us. Our role is to help them achieve their goals. Most of the time it will be their functional goals or whatever else it is. And so we do that. If we can't perfectly engage a child, that's okay. We can consider movement breaks. We can consider adjusting the length of the session. We can think about how much we're coaching that key support person, whether it be a parent or a teacher. Perhaps we need to consider doing a bit more upskilling and coaching so that we're actually getting the key support person to help engage the client. Or maybe we need to consider what challenges and goals might be more relevant for the client. Perhaps the goals we're working on aren't actually engaging enough for them or motivating enough. So if you have any of your favorite methods for building rapport with your clients, please feel free to share them with us because we'd love to know. So the next one is on building rapport with the client's support network. So we're talking about the key support person here. I would say that one of the most important things to do when it comes to building rapport with that key support person is to be understanding and sensitive of the distractions and other commitments that they have that might be unavoidable when you're having a session. So that, random incident that happens in the background and they have to get up and leave, and just using that as an opportunity for incidental practice, and also being empathetic and showing that, it's okay, it happens to me as well. And also embracing the, unexpected interruptions that happen on your end too, because I think parents really do, they feel more comfortable and engaged with us when they feel like we're also human. And I personally find that I build rapport easier with parents when I make their child laugh or giggle. So I spend quite a bit of my first few sessions trying to be kind of funny, because I just find that when the child laughs, the parent just automatically likes me more as well. Also, what's really important is setting expectations from the very get-go and then reinforcing those expectations. And I say that because we don't want the key support person or the client to be expecting us to do something that we actually can't do, in particular over online therapy. So just one last thing when it comes to building rapport, I'd just quickly like to share Maslow's hierarchy of needs, although I'm sure many of you are already familiar with it. So let me just open it up. Okay, so I start all of my sessions, like every single one of my sessions, with a check-in, because I understand that being a speech therapist, speech goals aren't necessarily the most important thing all the time. And in particular, when it comes to COVID, there is so much else going on in a family's life. They aren't necessarily able to engage with us in our conversations about speech therapy, or to do the practice necessary and be as present as we'd like them to be. And so by asking them the question of how are you doing? How was your week? How are things going? We're able to get a better understanding of if they've maybe got some other things going on that mean that they can't actually do what's up here. And a lot of our therapy does require our clients, our families, or whoever else is involved to be up here. So go back to the presentation now. Let me just share it again. Great. So next. So it's incredibly important to meet the family where they're at. And that means that we're considering, what's most important to them and why. We're considering their current commitments and their family routine. We're considering if we've given them all the information they need so that they can make informed decisions, that we're embedding the goals that we create together into their everyday routine as well. And so what I tend to do, in particular, because I'm keeping in mind that most of the time, the clients who come to me are new to online therapy, or perhaps new to therapy in general. So what I try to do is recognize where they are currently on their therapy journey, and then meet them in the middle, because I'm on this end with all the great things that I want to do. And if they're new, then I try really hard to kind of meet them in the middle by doing a little bit of what they want and then a little bit of what I want. And by that, I mean that a lot of families who might be new to therapy are potentially expecting me to work one-to-one with the child, if it's a child, kind of working in maybe more of a worksheet type medical model, which works perfectly fine in some cases. It's not like there's anything wrong with that. But so what I'll do is I'll try to do a little bit of what they want and then a little bit of what I want. And by doing a little bit of what they want, which is more of that direct therapy, I'm actually coaching them anyway, because I'm modeling what I'd like them to do. So on the topic of coaching, though, in my opinion, coaching is incredibly important. Or I guess coaching is most effective when you're considering providing the key support person with the skills they need to manage all of those challenging and daunting situations that you want them to manage in therapy. So for example, giving them strategies to not only manage to implement the therapy goals, but also the attention or concentration, the distractions, and also the dysregulation. And I'm talking here about sensory dysregulation, but also emotional dysregulation. So giving them all of the skills that they need so they can feel confident in actually applying what we're suggesting they apply. And that way they can also meet us in the middle. Oh, that's right. So there's another resource I'd like to share. This is again an UMBO resource and it's on coaching. So hopefully that has shared. Okay, now next we will move on to flexibility and client accessibility. UMBO is all about flexibility and it's all about kind of client first, meeting the client's needs and really providing holistic service. So when it comes to starting online therapy with a new client, consider that client's specific needs and circumstances. They might have physical characteristics that we need to be aware of. For example, manual dexterity. Can they actually access a keyboard? Or perhaps physical endurance. They might have stamina. That means they can maybe only engage with us through a screen for 30, 40 minutes. And those are things for us to be really aware of. So looking at the fatigue. Sensory characteristics, for example, their ability to hear or to see the screen, or the little words on the screen, for example, the sensory processing, cognition, so we're talking attention span, maybe even their willingness to participate in online therapy, their cognitive functioning, and also communication styles. So here we're talking about their ability to comprehend or understand auditory information, and also their speech intelligibility. Can we actually understand what they're saying over online therapy? Some clients are even just camera shy. And it's really important for us to be aware of that, because if they're camera shy and perhaps they don't want to see themselves on the screen, they can turn their camera off. That's okay as well. So online therapy isn't for absolutely every client, but just because a client can't engage in typical online therapy doesn't mean that you can't make online therapy work. So, be flexible to the family's circumstances. Again, they can use their smartphone. If parents are really busy, they can speak to you during their lunch break. They can even borrow a space at the preschool or at the school. Maybe there's a clinic that might be flexible with them. If there's a teacher's aide or an allied health assistant, make sure you're also taking advantage of that. And of course, hiring other spaces like council spaces, like a library. And just as a side note, sometimes screens can be really distracting for some clients. So you might consider asking the key support person to maybe move their screen further away if it's becoming too stimulating, or even if it's distracting, you could turn your own video off. And that might actually help, and they can just listen to you. So as I said before, UMBO is all about flexibility and accessibility. And so that's why we also offer anyone who's interested in online therapy services a free 15-minute trial. And that's where they can have a go at our online therapy platform, see what it's all about, potentially with a therapist, maybe have a mini consult. And that can just be a nice way for families or clients who are maybe a bit unsure about online therapy to have a little go. Okay, so I am zooming through this. Next, I will talk about data sharing. So I mentioned this briefly beforehand. We'll always need to be sharing data, whether it be the clinician sharing data with the client or the client sharing data with the clinician. And so that's simple things like resources, PDFs, links, but it could also be more heavy duty things like audio files and video files, which can be very helpful when you're trying to see things that you might not be able to generally see, or you're trying to conduct an assessment and you want to get a better look at what's going on. So you want the client to be videoing maybe a dinner time or a weekend event at a park and then sharing it with you. But of course, it's quite difficult to share when you're online. And so that's where you can consider options like YouTube. So your client can basically create a private YouTube account, upload a private video and only give you access, and vice versa. You can do similar things through other sharing options like Google Drive and Dropbox, and just double check that the privacy settings are right, and that, I guess, whatever, and also checking with your organizational policies as well around that. If there are any other suggestions about ways to share data, I would love to hear about them, because there are always challenges when it comes to that. Access online therapy. Sorry, just reading a comment from Miranda. Great comment, thank you, Miranda. Okay, and the last part of the main content is clinical confidence. So let me click on this. Okay, clinical confidence. So here we're just talking about, online therapy can be daunting. When I first started online therapy through UMBO, I was a little bit nervous because I just wasn't too sure about it, hadn't had too much experience in it. And honestly, it's not as hard as it seems. And anyone who's tried it will hopefully agree with me. All it really takes is a little bit of practice, a little bit of prep, and having the right supports available. So of course, it's from things like accessing the literature available on online therapy, of which there is quite a bit now. There are quite a few guidelines, quite a few published papers, and we will be sharing a list of them. I think Ed might also be talking a little bit about them as well, so that you can all have access to them. Of course, your evidence-based practice, it doesn't matter if you're working face-to-face or online. Evidence-based practice is always a great way to feel more confident in your clinical work. Seek mentoring support, whether that be through your organisation or through an association. I know Speech Pathology Australia has a mentoring program, and I'm sure many of the others do as well. And then also you can join peer support groups. There are some amazing peer support groups on Facebook that some of you might be aware of, and you're more than welcome to share on here. All you really have to do, though, is do a little bit of search on Facebook, and so many of them come up. I've come across heaps for speech therapists, and also for many of the other, like OT, dietitian as well, I know. And there are also Facebook groups specific to telepractice or online therapy. So they're great to join if you'd like a little bit of extra support. Great, so I think that's it for the main content. Now, I guess I might pass the mic back to Ed so that we can talk a little bit about those resources that I just mentioned, and I'll also share with you those resources, and then move on to the Q&A.
Thanks, Kizzy. Yeah, I'm happy to talk people through a little bit of this coaching stuff, and then we might move on to some questions. But basically, as Kizzy was saying, a really important tool that we have as clinicians and as people supporting people with developmental challenges, we need to be good coaches. We need to be able to not just get someone at the other end of the screen and look at them and try to, hold them down in front of the computer for half an hour, because that really isn't going to make a big difference. To use a speech pathology example, we're not going to be able to get a kid using speech and language effectively or communicating with an alternative system effectively if we're just plonking them in front of the screen for half an hour. So one of the things that technology gives us is the opportunity to reach people in their own contexts. And what we can do then is to coach the person with them to be able to deliver a therapy that's more in context than it would be otherwise if you're in a clinic, for example. So the way to do that is through coaching. And I developed this 4-step system of coaching. So the PDF is included there that Kizzy shared with you. So basically, there's 4 steps that you need to take, and the first is description. So you want to be on the same page with your person about what exactly the goal is of what you're doing. So in my practice, I'm often teaching people how to, for example, use keyword sign because it might be a goal of someone to be able to ask for help in a certain situation. So in that context, then I would describe what keyword sign is to the family, or if it's a key worker at the other end, I would describe it to them. I'd also give them access to videos or show them videos while we're there. If they want to go away and look up other videos to see how keyword signs are used or what it's all about, then they can do that as well, or a PDF.
My audio was off. I'm sorry. Thank you for messaging. I was just saying I'm not sure what happened with Ed, but I've just shared a resource with you all on the recommended different sites, literature and guidelines and things like that. They should all be clickable. And we've also got a number of recommended interactive resources for use with clients in therapy. Most of them are targeted at clients, at children, sorry, because I mostly work with children. But some of them, for example, Boom cards and TBT digital activities are fantastic for all age groups. If you're not familiar with them, there should be plenty of different YouTube guidelines online and heaps and heaps of different guidelines really on what they're all about. And yeah, the literature in that little handout are all recommended by Ed. So are most of the guidelines in there, and I really recommend taking a look through them if you're looking for additional information, as well as referring to your association, of course. So now, sorry, I might, while we're waiting for Ed to rejoin us, I might post a few polls because we have actually finished the main content and we're now about to move into 15 minutes of Q&A. Thank you everyone for staying on with us. So let's see what polls we have available to add on. What was the most interesting part about this presentation is the first one. Hopefully there was something that was interesting. And I just, oh yeah, good. Hopefully you can hear me still. Another poll would be, did we cover everything you wanted us to? And please be honest, if we didn't, let us know. And maybe if you could just type in the chat what you wanted us to cover, or if we missed anything, please add it in as well so that we can try to get to that next time. This is, for those of you who might not be aware, this is part of a series of webinars, so we can always try to cover it the next time. Miranda's question, do you have any telehealth Facebook groups targeted for adults? I'm not sure if there are any specific to adults, but that is something that I can definitely look into. I'm part of a couple of them, although I just don't have the names with me right now, but some of them might be more geared towards adults. So that's definitely something that we can look into, and then perhaps we can send some of that information out in our through emails. So I'll try to. Many are generally generic and heavily peds based, including OT ones. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of them, I agree, a lot of them are very focused on pediatrics.
I'm back.
Hello.
I don't know what happened there, but all good now. Yeah, so I'm happy to take any questions or queries, and Kizzy is too. So jump in the chat and let us know if you've got any problems or issues or anything that you want answered.
Just accept the permissions and ask again.
Yes, thank you for that, Jessica. We were just talking about Facebook groups that are geared towards adults with teletherapy. And yes, and then I was just adding some polls in as well to get a little bit more information from our audience. So I might just keep going. Just another poll. If you've had a chance to have a look through those resources, if you haven't, that's okay. Okay. But yes, any questions? We would love to hear if there's anything you'd like to ask. Ed is a fantastic resource. So he's been, how long have you been in online therapy, Ed?
For about 8 or so years now. It's changed a lot very quickly. It's changed a lot in the last 18 months or so, and the technology is really improving just exponentially. It's so Zoom obviously is a big name in digital practice now, but even a year ago it wasn't. There was constant reliability and security issues. There were issues with bandwidth as well in areas with low bandwidth or not a lot of reception. So it's yeah, things like that I've seen in the last year. You know, moving from that kind of being avoided as a platform for digital practice to being something that is really now used by hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and new businesses emerging, and new levels of expertise in the workforce is really exciting. One of the issues that we do face, and that I talked about with the Digital Health Agency today, actually, is really the potential for a digital divide between city and country, and between rich and poor, and the ways that we can get around that. So it's so much easier for people who are from middle to high income homes. Must be dinner time, Kizzy. To be able to access technology, and to be able to subsequently access digital health services or any other number of digital services. But in the context of rural Australia and people who have low incomes, it's really difficult, one, to be able to afford the hardware. And also in those communities, there's lower digital literacy skills as well. So another reason why coaching and capacity building in communities is really important, because that can help to get around that issue. It's not necessarily something that you have to, when you're coaching, you don't need your family necessarily to have the hardware. You can have a support person out there. You can have a key worker, someone at preschool, for example, or a teacher or whoever it is, supporting that person, and they might own the phone or the iPad or the computer that they use, and they can still coach that person. They can be the person who helps the person assist them to access and get through those digital literacy barriers to be able to access the same level of digital support that now everyone else in Australia can too. So yeah, big changes in the last 12-ish months in this landscape, and it's really exciting to see people engaging both here and broadly in the industry and in digital services, and being able to solve really wicked problems by doing that, or at least contribute to the solutions as well. I've got, there's a question here. Sorry, I missed that one, Jack. Hi, Ed. Given that you work mostly with rural clients, do you have a go-to method or a type of tech that you avoid? No, I don't. I wouldn't say I have one type of tech that I use over anything else. It's always based on the situation and that person's context. They might be really comfortable with taking phone calls, for the first 6 months before they get comfortable with me, and build a level of trust. They might love using Skype, so we have to get around that somehow. They might really love using Zoom. They might have no preference, or they might like text messaging to communicate. It's all a matter of trying to tailor it to that person's needs, and trying to doing that really helps the technology to disappear. And that's what you want to do with digital practice, is to make the technology unnoticeable. If you can do that, you're doing really well, I think. It's not easy to do. It doesn't always happen, but that's something to aim for, I think. And you do that by really focusing on what that person needs and how they communicate. One of the considerations that we have for working with people in remote communities is obviously connectivity and bandwidth, and that can be tricky sometimes. The NBN's doing its best, and Sky Master Plus is decent, but not everyone can afford it again. So I often find solutions around that, like potentially basing therapy at school, or if it needs to be at home, potentially getting videos of that person asynchronously. So getting video of what's happening at home, and then when that person gets into town, they then have enough signal to send that to me. Even because even in New South Wales, there's a lot of places where if you drive out of town, you've lost signal, so you don't have anything except a landline at home. So that's tricky. It's something you can get around by using those asynchronous techniques, though. With data storage, you can use Dropbox, or you can use WhatsApp as well. WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted, and it is fairly secure, and that kind of thing mainly depends on your client's preferences as well. Some people are more security conscious than others, and you generally have to more or less go with what your client wants to do. You can advise them that something might not be as secure as something else, but yeah, it's best to go with what they think and how they want to do things, because then it's a lot easier. The relationship goes a lot more smoothly. But yeah, no technologies that I really avoid in remote areas, but doing things like Kizzy said, like turning off your video, making sure that your router is in the right place, or making sure that your client's router is in the right place. I had recently, or 6 months ago, conversations with someone, and we spent 2 weeks trying to figure out where their router was, because they didn't know and I was trying to find it for them. And that was really challenging, but we spent a couple of sessions looking at that and trying to reposition it so that they would get a better signal, and they did. And then we could use video in the session. So that was a win. But it's creative stuff like that, and being aware of what tech requires to go into this stuff, to be able to find solutions to that. Thanks for the question, Jack. If we don't have any other questions, we might close it off. But feel free to get in touch with us at UMBO if you've got any questions, if you're interested in different training offerings, if you just want to have a chat. We love talking to new people. We love getting to know other people working in digital health as well, and working with them to help people all over Australia, especially in rural and remote areas, get the help they need, and the help in the way they need as well. So thank you very much, and thank you very much, Kizzy, for all that fantastic info that you presented. And stay tuned. We'll let you know in the next couple of months when we'll be jumping back online and sharing some more thoughts about digital practice and online therapy.
I think when this presentation ends, you might be sent to one of our free online trainings on online therapy. I think that might happen. But you are able to access some online training through us that's free at UMBO.
All right, thanks everyone.